Today, I'm going to talk about the AT&T Foundry, which is an extremely experiential brand and a frontline brand, because everyone who's a part of creating it is literally at the front lines creating the brand every single day. So today I'm going to talk about the story of the Foundry, and I'm going to talk about how we create value and brand value. But really, when you create value for a company, you're creating value for the brand, right? So today we're just going to look at it through the lens of brand, but I'm going to talk about overall how the Foundry is bringing value to AT&T. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and give you a little background on who I am and how I got to be a director at the AT&T Foundry. So have any of you heard of the term a change maker? Raise your hand if you've heard that term, change maker. Right, so I call that the inner rebel. A little bit about myself. I lived in New Orleans for a few years right after Katrina. I was a part of the rebirth of the city and the movement. I worked with a lot of entrepreneurs there. Some of them weren't even entrepreneurs, they were just business owners, but because of Katrina, they were forced to be entrepreneurs, which is a very different mindset and skill set. So that experience really got me up front in the trenches with entrepreneurs and started my work with startups in a very meaningful way, I'd say. Second experience that has really positioned me for this role in the Innovation Center and to help bridge the gap between startups and corporations is my first year at AT&T. I worked in those trenches managing a team of technicians in Oakland and Berkeley, literally driving an F-140 around Oakland, being yelled at by customers and grumpy technicians, and really understood the dashboards, the operational mindset that it takes to serve customers at AT&T. The third experience that has helped me work at an innovation center is just being a citizen of the world, I like to say. Diversity is very important when it comes to innovation. If you are not open to other people's thoughts and perspectives and willing to put yourself in their shoes, how are you going to connect all these different parties and really listen to new ideas and really believe that ideas can come from anywhere? Because as I said in my previous slide, AT&T Foundry, where ideas are made. So AT&T has a legacy of transformation. This is actually our first open workspace over 100 years ago. So we were actually way ahead of the time if you think about it. But in all seriousness, when your company is over 100 years old, you do have to transform, and we've done a great job of that, and we have a legacy of transforming. However, having myself worked in the larger company, I know that when you're in the mindset of dashboards and you're operational and you're trying to hit numbers, and then you're told, oh, just spend a little bit of your time taking risks, just spend a little bit of your time trying new things, right? Does that you really have the full freedom to do that? Well, you can try things, but as long as everything shows up green at the end of the day, right? So that's why the Foundry, one of the reasons why the Foundry was created is because you literally have to disrupt from the inside out, and you have to get outside of your regular mode of operations to really have the room and space to take risks and to really think and bring in new ideas and absorb them. But when you have that finger on top of you, those dashboards, it's very hard to do that. And perception is essential in the innovation ecosystem. This is actually where I work, which is pretty cool. Not what you think for AT&T, right? This is probably not how you picture an AT&T office. So this was one of the first steps. So going back one more time to why does AT&T need a Foundry, this is one of our favorite quotes, right? They talk about how all our competitors are coming from different spaces. It's no longer just Verizon and Sprint and T-Mobile. There are other companies, there are startups. It's coming from everywhere because AT&T is so expansive. So while all these startups have an intense bias to action, a tolerance for risk, experimentation in their DNA, and they have relentless product iteration, if we're just sitting there editing PowerPoints, what's going to happen, right? So another reason why we started the Foundry. 3 missions of the Foundry. Number one is to engage the ecosystem. So we meet with over 500 startups a year to hear what their ideas are, to understand what the new technologies are, and to really serve as a front door for startups in Silicon Valley and in our other locations. In the past, startups would have to go knock on, or not even startups, just partners in general would have to go knock on 10 different doors around the company and around the country to get to the person they need to meet with. Now that we have the Foundry, it's a much better experience. So talk about experiential brand, when you can just walk into one door and know that that team is going to help you, listen to you, connect you with the right group. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like. And then evolve the company culture. So we are literally a proof of concept for how the company can be. And we do that through the way we work, through design-led engineering, the way that we share our perspective and bring the outside in and constantly push the envelope. And then impact the business. So what are the technologies? What are the products? What are the actual tangible new changes that come into AT&T because the Foundry exists? So not just the incremental innovations, but how can we push to get further and really make an impact for our customers? So the AT&T Foundry is a network of innovation centers. So we have a number of different locations. I'm based in Palo Alto in the heart of Silicon Valley. Obvious reasons why we want to be located in Silicon Valley. Israel, we have a foundry in Israel, in Ra'anana, which is right outside of Tel Aviv. If you haven't read Startup Nation, it talks all about how Israel is a center for innovation and new technologies. So we want to utilize the technologies and the great minds there. Then we have centers in Plano and Atlanta. Those are our two hubs for AT&T. So we still want to stay connected to the business. And you'll see, I'll talk a little bit about how we stay connected to the business and make sure that we're not just an innovation center, but AT&T's innovation center. And then we're opening up our 5th foundry in Houston, actually June 7th. So that'll be exciting. It's the first time that we are having a specific area of focus within a foundry, and we're doing it on connected healthcare. Okay, so in preparation for speaking with you all today, I decided to look up the Google searches for innovation in the past 10 years. I like this kind of heart monitor look here, but it's basically going up, right? And we can all tell people's titles are changing, the topics at conferences like this are changing. My inbox is full of people just wanting to know, how do I create this innovation thing, right? So there's a lot of curiosity about it. There's also a lot of faux innovation happening as well, where you just call something innovative and think it is without really looking deeper into how to create innovation. So with this innovation overload, how does your brand cut through the noise, right? I have a lot of startups that I talk to that get pulled into fast pitches with different companies or asked to speak at events, and they don't know if these are really meaningful experiences for them. And I'm sure you all as well are consumers of innovation talk, and how do brands cut through the noise to touch you? So now I'm going to transition over to brand indicators. We're going to talk about 9 brand indicators, the lens of which I have seen through my story, through the story of the Foundry, us create a valuable brand through the Foundry for AT&T. So there's going to be 9, because I'm a rebel. I don't want to have 10, but there might be a bonus at the end. Okay, first of all, the space, open and flexible. Again, this is another picture of where I work. When everything's on wheels and you can move your desks and you can run into people, it just changes your whole mindset when you're not in a cubicle and walled off. Yes, sometimes it's hard to concentrate, but I think overall what we're trying to accomplish is exchanging of different ideas and getting people to talk and creating that serendipity, which I will speak more about. So I like to tell people that my job is creating serendipity because we have the startup world, we have the corporate world, and those two inform each other. And the more open I am to both audiences, the more likely we can engineer serendipity, where we can take inventory on one side and the other and see how they fit together. So to do that, you need the right kind of people in an innovation center, because those people represent your brand. We're a small team. Across all the different locations, we have 80 people. So every single person matters. They need to be collaborative, they need to be open, but this is one point where this is like deep insight. They need to be able to handle ambiguity. And anytime I interview someone for a position, I ask them, how have you operated in an environment of ambiguity? And how have you found ways to create value in that environment of ambiguity? Because we can put the goals forward, you just saw the mission of the Foundry, but if you don't know if no one's going to tell you how to get there, there's no steps to how to create innovation. So you have to be able to determine that value, jump on the opportunities. There's no dashboard that's going to tell you that you're doing a good job when it comes to innovation. So really, really important. I think also taking risks is very important, and it's easy to say, oh, create an environment where it's easy to fail, but you have to really have that gut internally that you're willing to make a change and try new things. Culture, collaborative and experimental. So you have to have we say a bias to action as a part of our culture, where we just try things and we support each other in that. So sometimes I will get slapped on the hand from somebody in the larger AT&T. Oh, Ruth is she's bringing another thing to the table. She doesn't someone else talk to this startup. Oh, another thing. We're already on the road. We're 2 years away from this new technology. Okay, that's not soon enough, and we can't settle for 2 years. So we have to, in our culture, support each other towards that. I also here want to mention that as part of the Foundry setup, I was showing you that slide with the 5 different locations, right? We have vendors that are essential in our setup. That's one of my favorite things about the way the Foundry is set up is we have Ericsson, Amdocs, Cisco, Intel, and Alcatel-Lucent, now Nokia, all contributed to an innovation fund to help support the foundries. And so what that does is pull the risk away from us being able to try new things because we're not an expense line, right, in the budget for the whole company. It also allows us to really take those risks and experiment, and that really drives our culture. Oh, and we also are partnering. It's ultimately one big partnership, which is in the DNA of the Foundry. All right, this is my favorite slide. If you don't know who these people are, the ones on the right are the cast of the show Silicon Valley, HBO show, right? And the other picture is a picture of our AT&T executives. So just taking the dichotomy there, right? And this is where the Foundry operates, is in between these two groups. And so we have both an outreach and an in-reach strategy to make sure that we connect these stakeholders with an informed point of view. So that when the cast of Silicon Valley knocks on our door, or people just like them, which happens pretty much multiple times a day, we can tell them with an informed point of view, well, this is actually what's happening in our home solution space, or our digital life space, or we do or don't support this kind of technology. This is or isn't on the roadmap, or we do see an opportunity in customer care for more social media efforts. And then on the other hand, we have groups internally that are just like, I just need some perspective on trade-ins. I need some new ideas around phone trade-ins. So can you just share with me what you've seen on the ground? So this is essential right here. This is like the linchpin, I think, to what makes all our indicators work, is having both that outreach and in-reach strategy and not just speaking from assumptions, because there are a lot of startups that will just assume, oh, AT&T is trying to optimize their call centers, right? No. We don't care about optimizing call centers. We care about creating a digital-first experience where customers can help themselves. But we don't know that if we're completely operating in a silo away from our mothership, which we are, like I said, the AT&T Foundry, not just an innovation center. So a little bit more about this. Like I said, we've interacted over time with probably now about 2,000 startups, VCs, developers, thought leaders, so that we can forge new partnerships and really give that outside perspective back inside the company. So here, these are some strategic internal business units that we work with. Most recently, Smart Cities, Advanced Solutions, which means business solutions, Domain 2.0, which is our network transformation group, Mobile Security and Cloud, Entertainment. If you haven't heard, we bought DirecTV. And the Foundry's at the forefront of a lot of the discovery around what are those new experiences for customers now that you have a company that owns entertainment and mobility capabilities. IoT, I'll talk a little bit about that later, but we're also at the forefront of developing that area for AT&T. And care and operations, because you know what? It is the maybe less sexy part of the business, but it is an important part of the customer experience to innovate on. And then externally, here's some of our stakeholders and audiences. Media, obviously, because we're doing all this great activity with the brand, but of course we need the word out. We need the media to go put signals out into the ecosystem for us. VCs, great partners with VCs. universities, especially in Palo Alto, we partner with Stanford, and in Atlanta, we partner with Georgia Tech, amongst other universities. Community partners, that's accelerators and other groups like nonprofits, startups, corporate partners, not just the ones that are contributing to the innovation fund, but other corporate partners. Sometimes we'll have someone knock on the door and say, I'm working with your company, and I'm having a really hard time, scaling across the company. Can you give me some insight onto how I better work with AT&T? So having an innovation center set up to do that is creating more success for our partners and ultimately for AT&T. And then government. We have a lot of government officials, regulatory groups come through to understand what is innovation and how do I support it? And again, this is a platform that AT&T provides so that we can connect to those audiences, because it is important that our regulators understand what is innovation and why do I need to stop it or not stop it. Okay, indicator number 5, approach to work. So like I said, we have a bias towards action. And I'll give you an example of a startup that came through that we worked on a project with, that we skipped a whole bunch of steps and got straight to it. There was a startup that came in through our Thought Leadership series, Futurecast, that had a technology that could had acoustic intelligence. It was able to listen to sounds, almost like Shazam, and tell you, oh, the doorbell rang, or there is a fire alarm. And we thought about it, and they were using the use case of walking down the street and safety down the street. So they said that if someone was running behind you, it would be able to hear and burst through your phone and send an alert saying, running footsteps, or if there was a fire truck passing by. And so this was all for safety on the street. And we said, okay, well, can you do things like glass shattering or a knock on the door? And thought about two of our new platforms, the Connected Car and Digital Life, our home solutions technology, and how it could create the experience of a connected home or connected car using sound as an intermediary step to having a connected doorbell, a connected smoke alarm, a connected window, right? And lower the cost and the barrier to entry for a customer to have a connected life. And so instead of setting up all the different requirements and the cost and the budget and everything ahead of time before even trying, we just tried it. We just set it up. We just went and connected our Foundry and saw that it does accurately detect the sounds, that we could create a rules engine and create this experience of a connected home. And then we created that demo and proof of concept and handed it off into the business once we saw that it was feasible. So now that has been absorbed into the business unit. So a little bit about the traditional product development versus Foundry proof of concepts. So that lens of looking at a product, it's very long-term, very arduous. You have hundreds of pages of requirements. It takes a lot of cross-functional coordination, but we have a cross-functional environment in the Foundry. We have the designers, the engineers, the business people, all in one space, able to work very quickly together. We just need a 1 to 2 page inception document saying why we're doing it, and then we get to work. And the results, the time difference is the biggest. It's completely accelerated. And when you have a long product development cycle, there's a very low tolerance for risk, because if you have something pulled out and you've set up 2 years of time to work on it, people go into denial and they just keep pushing forward, right? Oh, it's not really turning out to be a good product, but I'll just keep moving forward. So instead, we work in projects. And these are shorter cycles. They're 90-day sprints. We go through different phases. We focus on the technical aspect, or we focus on the design aspect, and we really just get a proof of concept out there versus working towards a long-term product. So indicator number 6, projects as catalysts. So we always ensure that the work can feed back into the business. This is another reason why we do the in-reach, outreach strategy. So we make sure there's a home for that project, and we do that by having a sponsor. So I'm going to share 2 examples with you. So we had a project called OnRamp. We created a connected car platform because we knew we had a drive studio. This is about 2 years ago, opening in Atlanta, and Ericsson was a partner here. So we worked with Ericsson to explore and better understand what kind of experiences consumers would want in a connected car. So we did user research. Another new way of thinking that we drive into through the Foundry into AT&T is design thinking. So we had a design thinking study that we worked on, found some new ways that consumers wanted to use the connected car, created a platform, created APIs, and that really set up this Drive Studio in our connected car platform. That team was, at first working with OEMs to start developing that product, AT&T's connected car product, and we were really a part of the beginning of that. And so that project, the on-ramp, was a catalyst to something bigger. Okay, Project Cascade, which is now called AT&T Number Sync, which is already launched into the market. This actually came from an employee that thought it would be really great if when he went on his boat, he could just take his flip phone and use the same phone number so people knew that he was calling them and not having to call from a different phone number because, right, people don't pick up phone numbers they don't recognize anymore. So this evolved through, again, we did a design thinking study, and we found that users really thought this was going to be important for their smartwatches and their tablets. They didn't want to have multiple phone numbers. So now we have this, it's already launched to the market, and you can have one phone number, one identity, and it's been a catalyst towards other projects around identity. And this was sponsored by our device team. So it also had a home in the business, so we weren't just creating projects and then not having a place for it to live. Okay, this is my favorite thing to talk about, engagements with startups. So like I said, we're a much friendlier front door for startups to work with, but something that I've gotten really good at is coaching startups to talk to AT&T executives. Because if you go in to talk to one of our executives and you spend 50% of your time talking about the problem that you're solving, that executive is gonna be like, I'm not investing in you, and I'm not a VC. That's for your VC audience. I'm already in front of you. I'm listening to you. I know I have a problem. Why are you spending 50% of your presentation telling me that about the problem you're solving? So that's one of the common mistakes that happens. Also, you're talking to that product owner of our, let's say, phone trade-ins, and you come in full steam. Oh, AT&T's phone trade-in, it sucks. It's terrible. It's okay, you're talking to that product manager. They know. They're right in front of you right now. They're asking for your help. So let's help them. Let's get to your value prop instead of going in full steam, hurting egos here. And it works the same way with AT&T, where there's a lot of corporate structure that is important. I'm sure a lot of you worked at corporations where they get on the phone and they say, I'm part of the whatever organization. I'm part of the De La Vega organization. I'm part of the Stanky organization. And that startup's like, what does that mean? What does that mean to me? So we play the role of the translator and the guide, and we really make sure that everybody's on the same page. So before, when I was talking about that digital first experience, right? So we bake that into the presentations of the startups when they meet with these executives. We coach them and go through iterations of their pitch and their demo so that when they say, this is going to help you create a digital first experience for your customers, that internal AT&T person is like, oh yeah, wait, that's on my list, that's on my to-do list, and they perk up, versus just saying, oh, users will help themselves. So that's one way that we play the role of guide and translator. All right, so we also provide a platform to showcase AT&T as a thought leader in the broader tech industry. So this is an example of how we do that. This is my baby. This is the FutureCast series. It started as an event where we brought together leaders in a space to talk about the future of blank. And we evolved it in the past 2.5 years from just an event to a strategy, to a platform. So what that means is we have these curated, intimate discussions with thought leaders to talk about our collective technology future, highly curated. So I'll give you an example. The last FutureCast we had was with Young Guru. He's Jay-Z's sound engineer, and he was our guest. We have a moderator, Andrew Keen, former TechCrunch journalist, that moderates the whole discussion. We invited a number of innovators within that video and content creation and music creation space to come and share their ideas with us. And there are a few elements of FutureCast that make this a really experiential brand and have had it take off. Again, it started as just an event. It's invite only. We only bring people who are interested in talking about the topic. It's open, so we spend about 10, 20 minutes talking to the main guest, and then we open it up to everybody to start having a conversation and participate. We started 2 years ago an element of having demos, so we have about 6 startups that we select to come into the space. We meet with over 500 startups a year. Not hard for us to pull those in. And what we end up doing is giving them reflected glory, I like to call it, of the AT&T brand, where we become a platform for them to share their technologies and their thoughts. And ultimately, we end up baking in thought leaders into our discussion by having that demo element. Our guests, we've had guests, like I just said, Young Guru, but we've also had Sebastian Thrun, who is the head of Udacity and formerly Google X, talk about EdTech. We had one with David Hornick called The Science Fiction of Silicon Valley. We've had speakers like Steve Case talk about the United States of entrepreneurship. We've had Robert Scoble, Ben Jealous, a number of thought leaders in the space to really be catalysts, but also brand ambassadors for us. Because every time these people come and speak, they have their own following that they bring into the Foundry. We also put all the content online. So write this down, futurecastseries.com. We could record all these videos and create thematic clips, make it very easy for people to share. And what that's done, again, we had one by Nir Eyal. He writes this book called Hooked. He has a crazy following. He shared one of the clips that we put him in from when he participated in Futurecast, like 9,000 views overnight. So these people become our brand ambassadors. And every time we have this topic, again, we want to cut through the noise. So what we do is we really find the tension in the topic. We don't want this to just be another one of the 100 IoT events. We really try and make this different. And what's happened in turn is now AT&T comes to us and says, we really want to understand the future of content, the future of EdTech, the future of these technologies like VR and drones. Okay, here's a Futurecast clip. And they've been able to utilize that content internally. It's now going to be on the curriculum for our high potential employees. So this is a way we started out by being a platform to connect the two worlds, and it's just growing from here. Finally, number 9, partnerships. So like I keep reinforcing, we're at the alignment of startups and corporates. And we do that when we sponsor or participate in different discussions. We try and always find that brand alignment. So for Futurecast, for example, we have a new podcast starting with Startup Grind because we want to reach that startup audience. One last example of how we do that, our drone technology exploration. We are developing and showcasing our viewpoint around drones around our partnerships. So we're partnering with Rocket Space, which is a corporate and startup accelerator, to create a futurist report to show all the different people we've been talking to and how we've been able to form the drone point of view within AT&T. So with that, we just talked about how innovation creates brand value. You can always contact me if you didn't think I was a rebel. I found out a way to make my email at AT&T truth@att.com. I give that out very openly because I can't engineer serendipity without being open and flexible. So, and then this is one of my favorite pictures from this past year. I don't know if any of you recognize, he's from Silicon Valley, Ehrlich. So this was at a comedy show at a tech event, and he just kind of pulled me out of the audience, and he was like, "What do you do?" And I was like, "I basically live in an episode of Silicon Valley." So that was kind of an amazing, cool moment I wanted to share. So with that, I think we maybe just have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Yeah, are there any questions out here? We're going to have mics over on that side and on this side. And if you're out on the live stream, got a question right over here. If you're on the live stream, you can use that hashtag and ask a question that way, too.
Hi, thank you. Amazing, amazing presentation. On the bias for action, interestingly enough, we just had a conversation about this yesterday where I work. And the question was, how do you balance getting something to market, not being late, being competitive, with quality and making sure that it's ready to be out there?
Right. I think part of that is asking questions and our approach, our user-centered design approach, because we do often have conversations that start with, "Oh, so how did you come up with those use cases?" "Oh, we just talked to each other. We just brainstormed internally." "Well, what kind of user research did you do? Did you go out and talk to people? Did you look up our internal portal there's a lot of tools where you can look up research." So we try and balance that out with questions, because I think you can have speed and quality together. You just need to ask the right questions, set up the right steps so that you're looking at the user, you're looking at the experience, but then also by iterating, instead of waiting to set all the pieces up and then going, which takes time and then usually keep moving through mistakes and bad quality. Instead, you go quickly, you work through projects, you leave room for iteration, and that kind of takes care of making sure that your quality is on track.
Cool. Any other questions over on this side of the house? Another question over there in the back.
Ruth, thanks so much. So actually, I know when we found you and the Foundry to come up here on stage and speak, how do people actually find you? Is your team looking out in the marketplace and deciding who to engage your consultative services with? Or is it the other way around? People are coming to find you because honestly, we really weren't a whole lot aware of you until we started doing our own research. So how does the journey begin with the type of partnerships you're going after, to your point you talked about earlier? How did it start? Yeah,
so I think it's, like I said, a lot about the corporate partners that we create through their networks, through the accelerators. It's really trenchy. It really takes time, again, because we have a small team, but it's looking for those high impact ways of getting out to our audience. So using FutureCast as an example, instead of just holding an event, we really make sure that the people that we curate the audience with, that we curate the speaker, the demos, that all of them become advocates of our brand so that it spirals and creates a louder noise by putting the content online. But then I do look for partnerships like Startup Grind, Rocket Space that target our audience so that we can have meaningful relationships with them. And I think going for that depth and meaning will really get people to be advocates for our brand.
Ruth, thank you very much. That was great. How about a nice round of applause for Ruth?